All right, now let's return to one of our top stories here on RT, that of the ongoing situation in Syria. Now, the Syrian government finds itself further isolated after ultimately being expelled from another international body. The Organisation of Islamic Cooperation has now suspended Syria's membership. Let's discuss it now. I'm joined by Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, a political analyst from Britain's Politics First online magazine. Thanks for coming on RT today. So the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation pins the blame on Assad for atrocities carried out against the Syrian people. All the while, it's the rebels claiming responsibility for the most recent attacks. Is that fair?
Well, first of all, I don't think too much importance should be attached to this organisation. It has very little influence. It doesn't have really any teeth to enforce its decision. And also, let's not forget that Saudi Arabia is probably its leading member. And we know very well where Saudi Arabia stands on the conflict in Syria. So I don't think too much importance should be attached to this organisation and what its verdicts are. It's largely symbolic. But, however, the truth is that I'm not aware of any side in the history of warfare that doesn't commit atrocities or war crimes. No country in the world is an angel, including the United States of America. But I think it's fair to say that from all credible, objective sources, it would certainly appear that it's the armed militants in Syria that are committing the most heinous atrocities.
Well, you talk about the armed militants, as you say, committing the atrocities. Rebel fighters now say they may join al-Qaeda to battle the regime if they receive no other help. How will that affect the battlefield in Syria?
Well, that shouldn't come as a surprise. This uprising in Syria is largely an Islamist one. And of course, al-Qaeda is a natural port of call for an Islamist uprising. I think it's a very, very worrying development. But also, we shouldn't assume that al-Qaeda and the armed militants in Syria, they're not fighting together already. From credible sources, that certainly is the case.
But doesn't it seem a bit bizarre to you? I do apologise for interrupting, but a bit bizarre. There's the West with its ongoing war on terror for more than a decade now, and yet also here are Western countries, certainly in Europe as well, that are funneling weapons to the opposition, who are now saying they side with al-Qaeda. Doesn't it seem a bit peculiar that the Western stance continues to support the opposition that is now siding with al-Qaeda?
To a layperson, it certainly comes across as peculiar. But of course, if you know the history, you will see that the West and Islamic extremism, though they don't get on with each other, they certainly get into bed with each other when there's a common foe. Let's have a look at the West and Islamic extremism in Afghanistan in the 1980s against the Soviet Army. Let's see how the West and Islamic extremism came together in Bosnia in the 1990s, and the same also in Kosovo. So this won't come as a surprise to Western politicians. They're quite aware of it. It will, of course, come as a surprise to domestic audiences in the West, who are largely being fed a story that the Assad government is this genocidal, mass-murdering machine, and the opposition are innocent bystanders, so it won't come as a surprise whatsoever.
Well, let's bring in the issue. Let's bring in the issue, if we can, of the UN Security Council reportedly rejecting Russia's initiative to condemn the latest terror attack in Damascus, an attack that the opposition has already claimed responsibility for it. If that's true, why would the UN take that position?
Well, the Western countries at the UN, in particular America, Britain and France, they need, in order to pursue their anti-Assad policy in Syria, they do need the backing of their domestic audiences. If they go along with Russia's initiative, which is a very fair and reasonable initiative, an honest initiative, Western audiences, domestic audiences, will start to say, well, hang on, if our representatives at the UN have now condemned these terrorist attacks, it doesn't exactly fit with the story that the opposition are these innocent men and women that are freedom fighters. That's why Russia's initiative at the UN in New York has been opposed.
Yeah, indeed, it's very difficult to wade through all the smoke screens and the murky issues, and whether it's the truths and the lies, all of it. It's a very, very messy subject, and it's not getting any clearer. Dr. Marcus Papadopoulos, a political analyst from Britain's Politics First online magazine. Thanks for coming on RT today.
Thank you.
Well, a recap of our top stories for you here on RT in just a few moments. If you would, please stay with us.
Wealthy British scion Zach Goldstein, an investment activist
Activist Max Kaiser.